You are listening to River West Radio on WXR WLP 104.1 FM Milwaukee. Support for this program comes from Collectivo Coffee and Troubadour Bakery, makers of artisan breads and scratch-baked goodies. Visitors to Collectivo's Bayview Cafe can look in on Troubadour Bakers as they prepare breads and cafe favorites daily. More info is at collectivocoffee.com. Welcome to Cinema Fireside, and we had a lot going on, so I failed to announce this up on the internet. Gabe, you're a good man. Thanks for calling in. Gabe has dutifully called in. Great stuff. So, yeah, we were testing stuff out, and we played a tune on FM, the Allman Brothers, and then we cut into this show. And so I think I was starting to put it up into the electronic universe, and we just got involved. Martin Hallinger was good enough to check things out on our phones just to make sure that it works well, and which it did. So if you're listening live in Milwaukee, it's dark out, it's autumn, and it's not. It hasn't gotten cold. I know in previous seasons it could be pretty darn cold at this point, so we've been very lucky to have a warmer season. And this weekend the pumpkins will be out in Whitefish Bay across from the library, and that is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful time as that park gets filled with pumpkins and folk music and food and all of that stuff. Speaking of the library, some of the libraries have like book nooks or free books or books for $1 or $2, and so I was at Whitefish Bay, and I came across James Franco's book, Actors Anonymous, in pristine condition for $1. I was on that, and it's just been a very glorious read. It's a very accessible read. You get tired at night, and it's like, oh man, I can only read a bit, and it better not be Ulysses or Moby Dick or something like that. You got to take it easy on the mind. And Franco is a great writer. In fact, when I was out in Los Angeles one time, they had a very nice, thick magazine, and he had a piece in it, and read that. And yeah, Mr. Franco's very talented in many areas. He's a great writer. And speaking of actors being writers, I also have an Ethan Hawke hardcover on the shelf, and I think the first page begins with a description of a nova. If I'm correct, I've yet to read that, but I have dug into the Actors Anonymous by Franco. It's the Halloween season. The university is playing Halloween films, including Night of the Living Dead, and I've seen that enough times, and I actually am reading Joe Kane's book on the making of Night of the Living Dead. So that's good stuff. Had the excellent opportunity to see 1981's Possession at the university. I think it was on Saturday, and I had read about it in probably the New York Times or maybe Film Comment or something, and I thought, well, this is a film to see. I believe it was shot in Berlin. And so to see it up on the big screen with an appreciative audience really made the experience worthwhile. Isabella Adjani is the lead actress, and she starred in Polanski's The Tenant from '76 and Herzog's Nosferatu from '79. Isabella Adjani is a knockout, and she is one heck of an actress. When I was watching Possession, and there's a scene with arguing in a kitchen, and I'll get into the aspect of the film itself, of the camera work and so forth in a moment here, but. So when I was watching her yelling and so on and so forth, I was watching her to see that she wasn't just yelling, that she was actually acting or in character, however you want to, color it. And I said, man, no, she's actually doing, she's just not yelling. She's just not arguing. She's actually doing a real good job. She's doing a heck of a job. And regarding the camera work in that particular scene, it was kind of like a mini Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with the innovation of the camera work and the velocity that the montage, the editing was providing along with that innovative camera work. And then on top of it, her acting. And I'm thinking, damn, she's a good actress. And then when we got to the second apex of her acting, we go from sheer emotionality to physicality, and it's in the subway system or something like that, in a tunnel possibly, and she is being possessed, and that was a transcendental moment. You were like, damn, man, this you go, man, you are outstanding. And you're just, it was done like in one long continuous take, I believe, and the audience was transfixed. We were all transfixed. It was a very, very, very transformative moment, and I was like, this is the best acting I've ever seen by an actress in a horror film in the history of horror film, and I stand by that. And people have weighed in and agreed. So Isabella Adjani in 1981 in Possession is can be considered the greatest performance by an actress in a horror film in 121 years. We'll give that to Isabella Adjani. And Zach, one of our film scholars, he chatted with me after the film and said he wasn't sure. Don't or I would say don't bet the farm on it. It'll be a cold night. But he thought that she may have won Best Actress in Cannes for that year, and then it may have been a controversial choice because it was for a horror film. So anyway, that can obviously be found out if she did win that year. Nonetheless, yeah, totally sold on Isabella Adjani. Totally blown away by her performance. Just one of our great actresses in cinema in the last 121 years, Isabella Adjani. As for the film itself, I don't want to oversell the film, and nor do I actually want to oversell anything, whether it's a performance or anything, because it's all subjective and we're all affected in different unique ways. So when you watch a film like Possession, you're thinking, man, why aren't other films as innovative like this? I mean, what's so hard about coming up with these camera shots, these innovative ways to do tracking, this, that, and to use space, and take on spatiality for what it's offering you in sets and so forth. And so it's just unique to experience something like that, where, because you watch, I saw maybe around 6, 7, 8 horror films so far this season, and I'm looking forward to a revisit to Brian De Palma's Phantom of the Paradise. I mean, there's hundreds of horror films, good ones, and unique in different capacities, and Phantom of the Paradise is one of them from '74 from De Palma. But anyway, so that was great to see that, and then Sunday morning, obviously, our radio dramas, and I think this Sunday it was Inner Sanctum and Suspense, and the second episode was Suspense, and it was taking place in an airplane, and they were hovering over Los Angeles, and there was some challenge to it, and that episode had a real unique feel to it. So that was Suspense, and they're going to be playing that every Sunday throughout October and then into November. So that's just an excellent way to add seasoning to the Halloween season. And I'm working my way through Stephen King's Sleeping Beauties. I always call them the Ulysses of dime store novels. And I'm going to start chapter 8 tomorrow. I usually read 3 to 4 pages a morning, something like that. I mean, I go bonkers after about 5 pages, or it's just enough has been read by that point, and then I turn to maybe like John Larth show and tell overviews of various theatrical personalities, or I'm reading Sam Shepard's the newest bio on Sam Shepard, among many, 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 many other books. And Gabe, thank you for your patience. We're about to get to you. And so, yeah, Halloween is unique. It's a great season because, it's obviously the diminishment of summer, the beckoning of the colder seasons. And in the colder seasons, some people get a lot more done. Some people get the same amount done in summer because nothing is going to deter them. They just work out in the sunshine and remain good to go. I saw Masters of Horror, the episode entitled Pelts, starring Meatloaf. Meatloaf is the iconic 70s singer who did again, this is subjective, which I consider the greatest, and again, it's one out of 8 billion people. For me, the greatest concept album ever, Bat Out of Hell. I'm sure we're aware there's Pink Floyd's The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon and some Who offerings as well. And again, each to his own. But I will take Meatloaf over any of that because it is such a joyous tribute to the young rock and roll spirit, and that's Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell. And he does his stints in acting and so on and so forth. I remember when Miami Vice was around in the 80s, and they would have these really cool guest stars like Ted Nugent and G. Gordon Liddy and that. So it was a very, very hip show with some, like I said, very cool guest stars in it. So anyway, thank you, listeners, for listening to Cinema Fireside. I'm going to let Gabe do his thing. You know what? I didn't bring my journal. I thought, what am I going to need my journal for? And but now I realize, man, okay, it's not here, but I've got my writing pad here to work on. So, Gabe, man, welcome to your life, dude.
Mark, thank you. Thank you very much. Cinema Fireside, great to be here. Mark, yeah, great stuff. Great live concert albums, the movie Possession, the autumnal season, and the season of really needing to get stuff done. Yeah, you just got to do stuff. You got to do it. Sometimes the depression fuels me. The seasonal depression kind of encourages me because it's like, well, because I'll get outside less because I feel like, well, I'm not really missing great weather. I'm not missing all the sunshine. It's pleasant to be outside, but, let's go to the library. I'll spend the whole day on a day off at the library, which is mostly what I did today. I spent the day at a nice restaurant, coffee shop that I've heard about that does cold-pressed juices and has nice organic smoothies and all this, other stuff that I really like. And, and I got to spend most of the day in there, spent like 4 hours in there, ate a nice lunch, had a nice smoothie, had some cold-pressed juices, had, plenty of coffee, tons of water, and, talked about Kansas City food and cuisine with this cook who works there. And it was just a really informative, cultured day all around without having to go and do a whole lot of stuff. Kansas City public library system is just extremely well put together. It's beautiful on the eyes. It's nice on the physical senses, and they have a wonderful catalog system. And I belong to 3 public library systems down here. So if there's anything that needs to get ordered, I can check it out. I can check online to see if one of the 3 location, and if B, if the single location doesn't have it, check within the system. So I've been really looking for the rare stuff, rare films, and rare books that I can't usually find. And man, in terms of film tech stuff, I've really notched a few things off. This week has been great. So I finally, at unlikely of places, at Half Price Books, was spending some time with 2 of my friends that came down to visit me over the last weekend, Mike and my other friend Michael, who goes by Larry. And of course I was, scouring over the film section, and I picked up a really gorgeous coffee table book that normally goes for about $100 and something. That's a complete history, oral history, and written history of the Friday the 13th film series. Now, mostly I picked this up for the photographs, the behind-the-scenes legends, and discussion. And what they did was they just have this huge interview section of first-hand interviews with the cast, the crew, the pre-production, production, post-production. And these films, it's nearing Halloween season. I've seen between 1 through 9, which number 9 is, Jason Goes to Hell, which is when Paramount sold the Friday the 13th slasher series to New Line Cinema, to Time Warner, for them to incorporate it into a new series, and they had big plans over the next couple of decades that they were going to do with that. So when the film series was relaunched unsuccessfully in 2009, it was directed by Ronnie Yu, and it was just an unwatchable, literally unwatchably bad film. The movie seriously was just made. It appeared by like a 7th grader that had gone to film school and just had like the most basic understanding of how to stitch together a film using production, high production values. Like all these other people are doing their jobs, but the director is just like literally following like a video game guide to putting a film together, like playing a video game, and the end result of the video game is that there's a completed film. Like, the Friday the 13th remake is not one of the worst films ever made by any subjective reasoning, but due to the fact that what should have resulted should have been extremely fun. You could have thrown any amount of originality in it, and it would have been welcome. It could have been thoughtful in any way, shape, or form, and the nostalgia factor could have been really fun. Because you have such a loyal fan base on all ends of the film spectrum, both extreme cinephiles and people that have no artistic connotations whatsoever, but just a total failure on every possible conceivable front of what a horror film can be, even by horror film standards, which are admittedly rather low in the numerical, in the objective numerical values and the subjective numerical values. But when that film came out, they pumped tons of money into promoting it. This book, which was thoroughly researched and exquisitely put together, it's just this lush, these beautiful wax, really nice photographic paper pages, and just really teeny tiny text in order to cram all of the written information in. First-person interviews with all the actors, which over the many, many years, there's a lot of people who have had basic cable in the 80s and 90s and the 2000s. The Friday the 13th film series, whether it's around a Friday the 13th or not, will get replayed no matter what, every Halloween. And every Friday the 13th that comes around, USA, for many decades, for many years, the USA Network would play the Friday the 13th films. And then later on, in years afterwards, the Sci-Fi Channel would play them in a slightly less edited form, as standards for what you can get away with on basic cable lowered and lowered and lowered, or were less and less strict about violence, about on-screen violence. Obviously, you still can't show, for the most part, nudity or sex, on basic cable during normal primetime broadcasting hours, but I've seen the first Friday the 13th from 1980, Part 2 from 81, Part 3 from, I believe, 1983. I think they skipped a year. And then 4, which came out in 1984, which is actually an incredibly well-crafted but generic horror film, following the slasher formula, which the corporate entity, Paramount Pictures, was rigorously following at that time. Part 4 is a really fun time at a really dumb movie. Crispin Glover's in it. You've got a lot of small, memorable performances, a lot of very small, memorable scenes. Tom Savini's probably second or third best makeup effects work is in Friday the 13th Part 4. And there was an extended version of a lot of those movies that Warner Brothers released later on. When in 1993 Paramount sold the rights to Friday the 13th to Time Warner, which is which is what owns New Line Cinema, they also sold the rights to the previous films, which were now owned by the Warner Brothers Archive. Warner Brothers realized that all of those films had been severely cut for violence, because in the 1980s, there was this huge cry out over violence and sex in music and TV and in film, saying it was polluting the minds of the youth, hence why you have the explicit lyrics warning on CDs and cassettes and vinyls, and why there was all of a sudden, there was actually a sharpening in censorship of violence on screen. I don't know of this era before the 1980s when actually you could show quite a bit of violent content, or you could show more lurid content on cable, like basic cable. During normal broadcast hours, there was there was actually, for certain swear words besides the obvious 7, there you could actually say some of these other swear words on basic cable, like TNT, TBS, USA.
Just let's not say them here, though.
Oh, no. We're not doing that. But Friday the 13th, as it had been broadcast in the 1980s, the violence was pretty much unchecked for a long time. Horror films, violent films, genre films. And then in the 90s, late 80s and early 90s, the code of what you can show on TV sharpened again really drastically. So that's the era that I know, is not being able to show pretty much anything on television. So, and that's waned, obviously, in the last 20 years. So, but Friday the 13th, I grew up with these films. I rented them when I was in grade school and in middle school, and I've seen, and on television in the years since, I've seen them numerous times. So Friday the 13th Part 4 has a very special place in my heart. The first one is actually a film, and it's a very influential horror film that holds up in the test of time. I mean, having seen, whether you've seen lots of horror films in its style and in its wake sense that it's influenced, for better and for worse, it still holds up as a horror film, as just a well-crafted, if slightly pointless American film, if nothing just for historical reasons. Friday the 13th Part 7 is a fan favorite for a lot of fans. It just is another entry in the same series, same formula, but it's executed very well. It's just very fun. It's got just a lot of great kills in it. And so it's really cool to go into this book, and I am going to read it from beginning to end. I don't just because something is a coffee book, or coffee table book. I always am rigorous about reading books about film, even when they're coffee table books, from beginning to end, and taking in all the content and all the information. Because otherwise, you're just like browsing. It's like going to an art gallery and looking at one or two pieces for a second, and then being like, "Oh that artist's work is really good," and having no idea and no understanding, and not really taking the time to really focus on what you're looking at. So I'm not going to be distracted by all the pretty pictures and the big lures of the obvious content and the obvious interviews and stories. I'm going to read the whole thing, just mostly for the archaeology and for the sociology of the producer's take on where were they at, what were they thinking, mostly in pre-production. Like, there's a lot of self-awareness that's already coming through, as Sean S. Cunningham, who wrote and directed and produced Friday the 13th, he was already a figure in film because he had come out of, he was a Broadway director, and he had produced, most famously, The Last House on the Left, directed by Wes Craven in 1972, which was already, which had been a huge hit, and had been, is still considered a drive-in classic, a grindhouse exploitation classic, but it's also now revered as an art film, because Wes Craven was a very, very intellectual, he was a humanities professor, and he translated his understanding of fine art into this sort of low-budget, extremist indie filmmaking. So rather than just making like a 42nd Street film, he understood the psychology and the rawness and the politics and the potency and the eternal human struggle of what was the larger theme of violence, rather than just making some grimy, violent film. He wanted to make something that was actually art. So Sean S. Cunningham really had his moment with that, and churned out a handful of, educational sex films, which were just, basically pornography guised as educational movies, which is how you could show X-rated film, triple X-rated films before Deep Throat and before that era. The only way you could show sex on screen was to label them as educational or documentaries or stuff of that nature. So Sean S. Cunningham was right on the forefront of that too. So pornography, Sean S. Cunningham. The exploitation film, Sean S. Cunningham. The slasher film as we know it, well, definitely put that label on Sean S. Cunningham, because in 1980, Sean S. Cunningham took out an ad in Variety and in numerous other publications proclaiming Friday the 13th to be the scariest movie, that the most terrifying experience in film that anyone's ever going to see. So all it was these block letters, and this was before Jason, before the machete, before anything. It was just the black background with the extra black interior of the words, of the font, and then the white, crisp outline with no halo, Friday the 13th. Now, he didn't know what the film was going to be about when he put this ad out, but there were offers on the table, and he raised a lot of money for this movie that had no script, no premise, no plot. He just knew that he needed to make a horror film where people were going to get killed. So on that premise, and based on the fact that that Halloween 2 years earlier had been the most successful independent film ever made, and was this huge, not only just for independent film, it was just like this giant horror film. Dawn of the Dead had made tons of money internationally and was this very talked about film, both in terms of being a work of art, a critical success, and and a very fun film that people just enjoyed watching, that ordinary people even recognized as having significant social and some artistic and major artistic significance beyond just being a really, really entertaining horror film. So Halloween was changing the nature of the game. Black Christmas had come out in '74, which is not a film that people have really talked about after they saw it. But between those two films, Black Christmas from '74, and which was directed by the future Porky's director, and John Carpenter's Halloween, there seemed to be the inklings of an idea that Sean Cunningham, who was drawn to money-making ideas, the very fast-moving, vitalic professional who always wanted to surround himself with fast-moving go-getters, and who were willing to work hard, long hours for little money, but were very loyal. And he did promise, and he did keep his promises. He did help many people find long-lasting success in various forms of the film industry and other industries as well. So being friends with Sean Cunningham and working for Sean Cunningham, he had a reputation for being his word, being loyal, and if you did your job well, he wouldn't forget that, and you would ultimately find success even if it wasn't with him later on. So that's really cool to read about. It was about that Sean Cunningham was the legend of Sean Cunningham is not just a made-up thing. He really was this enigmatic big figure in different genres of film, and he helped create certain sections of different genres of film for a reason. All of them, of course, being very lowbrow, but perceived as lowbrow, but that's, I guess, a matter of personal taste. So
you know it's interesting. You know it's interesting, Gabe, because you're talking about 72, Last House on the Left, and one of my fascinations is, what other terror films are there from that era? Drive-in terror films. And 74 obviously is the apex with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then you have Last House on the Left a few years before that. And I'm thinking, well, and I'm talking about American films. I'm not talking about these European imports that are dubbed and so on and so forth. And can you come up with any? I mean, I know a creepy one. Don't Look in the Basement.
Well, between you and I, Mark, we've both, we've not only discussed on the show a lot of the stuff, but you and I have both been drawn to films like this because films that are made with a certain primal intensity, using minimal resources, but this high flux of sort of primal creativity, there's just something to them. So you talk about the film like Possession, which is in some ways, Mark, I'm so glad you brought up Possession, because I saw this film 12 years ago in New York City. I saw a screening of it, and it was just, it was before they restored it recently. So it was this grimy, older print that Possession is a legendary film. It was legendary when it came out in 1981. It was legendary because they censored it in its initial VHS release, which really angered a lot of people because they cut about 15 minutes out of the film, some of which was because of violence and sex, and other of it didn't make any sense. It literally just ruined some of the more subjective and thought-provoking aspects of the narrative. Possession is a haunting, powerful film that just has so many different themes going on in it. It's like a great play that happens, yes, to have horror film elements, but they're almost secondary. And these horror film elements are unforgettably insane, like just so uniquely unsettling. Unsettling is really the only word I can really think of. Truly disturbing, unsettling, but because they're done with such tact and thought and precision and artistry, that film is, I'm going to say something that I might regret, but Possession might just be the greatest horror film ever made to some degree, because it has so much subtext. Sam Neill's vicious performance the film is more about the horror of being married to someone who you might not really know, and the relationship with yourself that you might not even know, that maybe that can come out once you've entered a formal relationship, with a binding relationship with someone. And I think the film really is about getting married to someone who you don't really know, and having a child with this person you're married to who you don't really know, and the hell that is unleashed from within yourself, that you enact upon yourself, the world, once you are trapped in this hell that is marriage and motherhood and fatherhood with a total, awful, horrible stranger. And you cannot get away. You cannot escape. You are trapped. It is prison, and you have no choice.
You're scaring me, dude. It's too close to the bone. But
so I think that's why Possession works so well, and that's why I think Possession is a haunting, powerful, otherworldly film, is because it has so much real subtext. Now, the way that he makes the subtext literal in the film, that's where the film goes from the absurd and the amusing to the absolutely bone-chillingly poetic and brilliant. The visuals, the performances, Sam Neill and Isabel's. Possession is an absolute masterful work of art. It comes out in 1981, which is a year for so many great films of so many different genres, but it's really a touchstone year for a lot of different subtleties coming out in other kinds of film.
Or not so subtle. I think we got like 3 werewolf films from that era: An American Werewolf in London, Wolfen, and The Howling.
All of which are great for completely different reasons. Wolfen is an oddity because you have Michael Wadley, who directed my favorite film, and there's about 7 or 8 different films that I will alternately say are my favorite film. Woodstock, John Carpenter's The Thing, Punch Drunk Love, Shadows in Paradise, Persona. Depending on, I guess, what time of day it is, you're going to get a completely different answer. But
right, you're in physiological flux, is what you're saying.
Absolutely, but Michael Wadley directed Woodstock. It's 3-hour, 4, depending on which cut you watch, 4-hour documentary about Woodstock. But then his only other film credit as a director is Wolfen, 11 years later in 1981, which is this unplaceable, and I mean that because the film doesn't really make sense as to why it was made or why a studio funded this film is utterly baffling to me, because it doesn't really give you the goods, and it doesn't quite deliver the artistic subtext that would justify it holding back the goods. But it has all this social commentary about Native Americans and it doesn't quite go too deep into any of the social subtext either. But it's just this interesting horror film, and it has this brilliant score, and it has some great visuals, and it has this first-person perspective.
And you know it stars Jack Nicholson.
No, that's Wolf 94.
Wait a second. Wait a second. Wait a second. Wait a second.
Yeah.
So now there's 4 of them?
No, okay. Wolfen...
I think I saw all 4 at the theater.
Yep. Well, Wolfen, American Werewolf, and The Howling come out in 81, and then Wolf, which Mike Nichols directed, which is also a commentary on the book publishing industry, comes out in 94, is this ridiculously expensive film that really doesn't translate to the screen why it was so expensive.
And that's the one with Jack Nicholson. Thank you,
And James Spader, yes. And it's a furiously entertaining film. And Michelle Pfeiffer, yes, Mike Nichols directed it too, which none of his talent really seems to come across in the film. Christopher Plummer's in that as well. But that is a delightful upper end horror film that is made by professional people who come from a very literate It's like when Philip Roth directs these really trashy films. Like, if someone else had directed this incredibly trashy film, it would just be a worthless hunk of crap. But because this literate, this genius is directing it, it ascends from being a piece of crap to just mildly forgettable.
Now that there's 4 werewolf films, Wolfen was a werewolf film, wasn't it?
Wolfen is, and it's the strangest werewolf film I've ever seen. Yeah, it's...
I can't remember anything about it, man.
I would have to put the Company of Wolves in that category as well, from 86, the Neil Jordan film.
I've yet to see that, if ever. Is it? Should I see it?
Mark, that is just a strange delight. I think mostly for the bizarre production values and just the fact that it's a highly original feeling movie. I didn't necessarily enjoy it, but I will definitely, I without a doubt, every Neil Jordan film is at the very least worth watching. Even if it's the same thing with Gus Van Sant. Even at his absolute worst, which he's made some really stinky, like fish department, alleyway, Saturday night fish department, dumpster, smelly films that are just bad, pretentious, and awful. At the very least, they're still really captivating and worth watching. Because they're just loaded with, even his failures are incredibly interesting. Like, just seeing how this all doesn't work are still, the individual components are still, like, eye-catching and intelligent and fascinating, even if, like, the finished product is just absolutely garish and awful. But I would say Neil Jordan and Gus Van Sant fall in that category of everything they've ever made is worth watching. Brian De Palma, we've talked about that on the show many times. Brian De Palma films, everything is worth watching in that, even the worst.
I've seen everything, every feature film he's made, save for Wise Guys. He's made about 30 of them. And Wise Guys, I got to call up the library. I got to get that.
Yep, Wise Guys is an interesting side. I definitely would call that an aside. But
have you seen all his films? Have you seen Wise Guys?
I think I've seen everything except for Passion, which I have queued up on one of my streaming services. So that's going to have to happen soon, because otherwise, if I keep letting that one slip, that's just going to be another 3 years before I force myself to watch it. So
you've seen like his first 6 Before Sisters, and wow, you're a learned man.
Everything.
You're one of the few. You're one of the few who actually have.
Dionysus, thanks to
Dionysus in '69.
Stuff that you can find, Dionysus in '69, which is an insanely rare and hard to find movie. River West Film and Video, white label, just made it available because people needed to see it. So Zav did it. He made sure that people had a physical means of renting and watching and seeing that movie. That was a movie I watched about 10 years ago, probably. no cover, no picture, no nothing, just the title written on in marker on a blank DVD box. And when I asked him about it, he said, "Oh, that's like, that's, you need to watch that that's worth." And I, totally blown away by that. But we did a few Brian De Palma shows 4.5 years ago. We did a two-parter Brian De Palma right before, in the summer of 2013. We did two-part Brian De Palma, and then right afterwards we did a two-parter David Cronenberg, and then we did a two-parter David Lynch. This was this was during the time when Zav had broken his leg, so he had nothing but tons of time to watch like 9 movies for every episode that we did.
And bless his recovery, may I add.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, those, I look back so fondly on those shows. That was just nothing but great times back in the day, and they still are. You know what? I miss Zav very much, but I know he's a man of time and busyness, and he gets things done, and I have nothing but the
he helps keep the ship afloat, so we thank Zav wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
As well as Martin Hallinger.
Yep. Mark, another book I finally found, I texted you that, was Fun in a Chinese Laundry, which is the von Sternberg memoirs about Hollywood and his affair with Marlene Dietrich, and his time in Hollywood at Paramount in the early 30s. That's been out of print in the States since 1970, but I found a British printing that was printed in 87. So that was just an unexpected delight and find at Half-Price Books. I just nearly just about jumped out the window when I saw that sitting there, and I said, "This is actually happening. I finally found it. It's right here, and I can buy it. It's mine." And if you think I just grabbed it, didn't think twice, didn't bother looking for any other books. Put the other 5 books that I had in my hand down, and I said, those are just meaningless in comparison to this. Manny Farber's Complete Writings, Pauline Kael's first collection of film writings, and a collection of Jay Hoberman. That's, who cares compared to this. This is a truly unique find. Not available online. Not available for ebook, not available for audiobook. It predates all of that. You need to get a physical print in order to get.
Well, my man, are you willing to reveal how you got yours?
It was sitting there at Half-Price Books.
Wow.
Just sitting there, and I just bought it. I just said, okay.
You took control.
I took control of that situation, and I bought that book, and it's mine, and I'm going to read it. And I'll tell you, there's few things I like more than books about the golden age of Hollywood as much as films from the golden age of Hollywood. So that's just super cool stuff right there, man.
And Mark, he was Jim Morrison's teacher at UCLA.
Oh, that's right.
So if you ever see, for our audience, if you ever get acquainted with Joseph von Sternberg, he's very, very stern and very professorial looking, very very scholarly, and once you see him and the way that he speaks, and then to imagine Jim Morrison sitting in his class, it's quite the juxtaposition.
Mm-hmm. David Thompson talks about that in numerous books of his, about the effect that von Sternberg had on Jim Morrison's on the way that he looked at the entire world. The way that the films that von Sternberg chose to show in his class, and the way that von Sternberg talked about reality, and the way that reality was imposed through music and film, the juxtaposition of image and sound on a 2-dimensional plane as viewed through the 3-dimensional prism of the human mind and through the eyes, the consciousness of seeing. It completely changed the way that Jim Morrison looked at reality, and that predates his use of, like hard drugs and really getting into poetry and really exploring music. But Jim Morrison really, at first, he said that his gateway into film is really how he first started to access the other fine arts, both in terms of his appreciation for and his creation of. So that is just super cool, because you don't really I don't really place von Sternberg next with like experimental, expressionist, really, really avant-garde art, but because of the fact that he worked in an era when it was these cameras in the early 30s were extremely hard to maneuver, and you had to make films that were very straightforward. But if you look at his use of editing, it was very influenced by Eisenstein and by Man Ray and by other surrealists and other expressionist filmmakers of that era that were doing really creative, exploratory, groundbreaking work with image and the absorption of media. Movies like Blonde Venus really have this just if you even just pause the film and look at individual frames of the film, the composition, the framing, the mise-en-scène, and the way that he uses montage, that's the one element where von Sternberg truly is unequaled, is the way that he edited and montaged his films. The way he would go from one studio, and he shot almost everything in his films are shot on studio. But it's that sort of Hollywood golden era. When I say golden era, I mean like the early 30s into the 40s. On-set realism. Casablanca has that magic realism of the on-set like that on-set. It's totally phony, but there's some sort of magic. To Have and Have Not has it. A lot of the Howard Hawks films have it. A sense of a dynamic theatrical sense of time and place and setting, and of this sort of these exceptions to the staginess of the acting from that era, which, as Mark has so often pointed out correctly, the acting from that era is not astute. It's in fact rather stagey and bad.
Right.
But it follows the Victorian style of acting and of stage acting. But there were these moments where, where the collection of artistry allowed for a type of realism to come through that really has this real potent beauty to it. So I don't believe in this crap that, all the films from the golden era of film are, such masterworks, and film from that era is so much better than movies from this era. I think that the best films from that era are better than a lot of the best films coming out now, but you have more good films coming out now than you did back then. So,
I will agree with your latter half of the argument that there are, because as we've evolved in thought and in technical practice, it shows up on screen, and there are many worthy films today as of back then. Back then, in the golden era, it was simply melodramatic entertainment. There was obviously some social rendering and so on and so forth, but each era has its own tone, its own sort of subject matter, its own atmospheric. So it's a ridiculous argument, and it's like comparing apples and oranges.
Absolutely.
Or shoes and cars. It's the argument is immaterial, and so in totality, I agree with you, Gabe.
Yeah, and to be honest, the great films of yesteryear, the great films of this year, who cares? Great films are great films. To say one era is greater than another or one era is lesser than another, that's basically, it's like trying to be the bully on the playground of film history.
Thank you.
And ultimately, you're not going to make any friends by cutting things off or by saying this era sucks and this era is great or this is good and that's not. Really, all you're doing is limiting yourself, and you're only hurting yourself. And the thing is that that all it is unwillingness and an inability to see truthfulness in art. That there is a universal truth that there is no absolute. There are no absolutes with film. There are no definites. There is no purpose. These are entertainments that occasionally are allowed to enlighten us, that are occasionally allowed to go beyond the limits of two-dimensional spatiality and really can open our perception, like any of the humanities, any of the arts. So to start labeling, that's like the same argument about certain types of music. like, oh, today's music is so terrible. Like, oh man, it's only the music from 40 years ago. Well, there's so much more music that is being released nowadays that is actually vastly superior to almost all the music that people that weigh that argument in. When I say, well, like what, and they give me examples, and most of the music that they cite as being the greatest pop music or the greatest rock music really is nowhere near even the best music of that year. In fact, it's rather mainstream and just not that great. So all these eras, you have so much undiscovered, forgotten about, buried treasures from all eras and all genres, both stuff that's been archived and remastered digitally. And, to say, like, this era is better than another era is ridiculous, because all that means is that you're depriving yourself of research, and you're depriving yourself of treasure. You're depriving yourself of the joy of unknown discovery. Listen to every genre of music from every era. Listen to as many suggestions from as many people. Read as many books. Watch as many movies. Listen to as much music. Go to as many plays. Talk to as many people. Read as many newspapers. Look at as many buildings. Learn about as many trees. Walk down as many streets. Go to as many cities. Think about as many things and do as many good things as you can. Do
Amen.
Everything if you can. Just do it. Limiting yourself by saying, no, this is good and that isn't, it just baffles me, because there is just so much joy that can come from the human experience. It is unlimited. It is only when you decide that misery is a necessity that it becomes an absolute reality, and it becomes a continued condition. Chaos and confusion and conflict are just these unnecessary but usual consequences of the human condition. They're going to happen, but just avoid at all costs. Who cares? Move on. Who cares? Your friends disagree with you? Who cares?
I don't.
Well, exactly.
You know what? I don't.
Exactly.
You know what? I just, dude,
Exactly.
I come across so much stuff. It goes in one ear and out the other. No one knows nothing. It doesn't matter. You're going to die, and it's not going to matter. All you're going to think about is, man, did I live the life that I wanted to? That's it.
Exactly. So with that being said, Mark, you'd asked me about 30 minutes ago about these films from the 70s, these slasher films, or like these great horror films from the 70s. And I mean, there are just these ultimate horror films that are these great works of art. The Last House on the Left, that like almost like,
dude, my man, you didn't answer my question. Early 70s, can you come up with any other terror film besides Last House on the Left in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from that era? And it's not to provoke you. It's actually, if you know something that I don't, I would really like to know, because I really dig that premise.
Well, Straw Dogs is a terror film in many extents. There's a lot of stuff that was made around it. Oh, there's these Bava films.
Okay, but wait a second. Now, okay, these are all European, though, and Tom has said that The Exorcist, which is studio. I'm talking about low to the ground, down to the curb, American terror films from the early 70s. Tom almost lost his glasses doing research. So, can you come up with something, Gabe? You got anything that we need to know?
Not off the top of my head, Mark. And the thing is if I have read about it or have seen it, the only ones that stand out that really are these giant works of art that really, really transcend the limitation, or that are even even ones that are just that's the genre they subscribe to. You know what, Mark? Now that I think of it, that's why Black Sunday in '74, directed by Bob Clark, was such a big deal, was because in terms of the annals of film history, horror film history, is because the horror film had faded and to the point where it almost didn't exist in American film culture.
Yeah, here's the deal. It lightens up a bit, but you can now. This is going past the early '70s, but it kind of ends with Last House on the Left. The Hills of Eyes in '77, which is a drive-in terror film, and you can say The Incredible Torture Show from '76, because both of those are quality. Hills of Eyes is quality. Incredible Torture Show is quirky.
Sure.
There's some really low budget ones from San Francisco around '75, and then Don't Look in the Basement, as I aforementioned. But none of these come up to the standards, except for The Hills of Eyes, come up to the standards of Last House on the Left as a terror film or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So they're really not prevalent. In those three that we mentioned are the standout ones. If somebody else knows something that we don't, it was made in someone's woods or something, please let us know.
Well, like I said, Black Christmas in '74 is the film that is credited with creating the slasher film as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
But before Halloween and Friday the 13th, the slasher film as we know it today did not exist.
I can throw one at you though, Gabe. Prior to Halloween, and that's is it Driller Killer? Which is actually predates Halloween as a slasher film.
Killer. Yep, Driller Killer, directed by Abel Ferrara.
Yeah.
In '77 or '78.
Yeah, I think it came out before Halloween.
Yeah, that is.
It's the templates right there.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And Mario Bava in Italy had created the slasher film. There's 3 or 4 films that he directed that created the plot device template for a masked or unseen killer systematically hunting down a group of people one by one and killing them, where they don't know they're being hunted or slashed until the end, when 1 or 2 people who are left alive all of a sudden uncover the entire swath of bodies that are left over.
That is amazing. And also, Gabe, I thought about a let's see, Heidi graced us with I Spit on Your Grave, and that actually would fall into that. Thank you very much, Heidi.
Thank you, Heidi. I Spit on Your Grave, but that's Italian.
No. This is American. You're thinking about I Spit on Your Grave that's
Spanish and Italian.
No. Are we thinking about the same thing?
I Spit on Your Grave, 1975, also known as Day of the Woman. I had an Anchor Bay VHS copy of it that I bought in 2001. It was one of the first exploitation films I ever purchased. And then I bought it on DVD, a collector's edition DVD that had a booklet that had stills and behind-the-scenes making, and it had a behind-the-scenes featurette. Mears Archie.
Wait a second. I think it's in the later 70s, and Heidi's saying 78. I remembered it as being an American film in the late 70s.
That's right. That is 78. So that would fall into the era of Halloween and post Hills Have Eyes.
Except it's a terror film, so it's a non-studio terror film is what we're looking at.
Yep.
Oh, my gosh. Gabe, we got to say goodbye. I just looked up at the clock, and have a great night, Gabe. We will be on at the same time next week on WXRWLP 104.1 FM Milwaukee. To hear past episodes, visit riverwestradio.com/shows and click Cinema Fireside.